As you can see from the screen behind me, we are starting a new series today called Made to Belong. And we are wanting to take a look at some key principles / practices that I think will help us close the gap between our intentions and our actions when it comes to actually experiencing the kind of community that God has planned for us. I believe that God wants us to enjoy relationships with one another that are life-giving. Where we bring out the best in each other, where it's iron sharpening iron, where we don't settle for false peace, we engage in constructive conflict so that we actually grow and develop and mature. If you take a look at the wall on your extreme left, you'll see that this is one of our key scriptures for the year, taken from Ephesians chapter 4, verse 16. And I love that. For me, this is a definition of community and unity. Speaking of God, He makes the whole body fit together perfectly. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're part of the body of Christ. He makes the whole body fit together perfectly as each part does its own special work. Which means that if each part isn't doing its own special work, we're missing out. As each part does its own special work, the other parts grow so that the whole body is healthy and growing and full of love. I cannot overemphasize how much God is for you and for me and for people and wanting us to flourish and grow and be mature, be resilient, be able to cope with the challenges and the stresses of life and the distractions and the competition and the temptations and to actually keep growing from strength to strength. And a big part, it's not the only part, but a big part of God's way of helping achieve that, God's way of helping facilitate that, is us growing from the superficial to the ever-deepening relationships with other followers of Jesus in such a way that it helps us all to grow. Yeah. In fact, I was talking soon I met with another pastoral couple recently, and we were just talking again about this idea of unity in the church. And I get bothered when I feel like people have this overly sentimentalized idea of unity, where it's all just kumbaya and we just hug each other and it's just everything is just nice and peaceful. Someone's lying, okay? Anytime you have a bunch of people together, there's going to be disagreement, there are going to be differences, there are going to be differences of opinion, in some cases even differences of values, and so real unity is not the absence of conflict, it's the presence of maturity. And when I say not the absence of conflict, I mean there should be healthy conflict as we engage and talk and wrestle and try and listen to one another. I think listening, it appears to be an increasingly missing ingredient in relationships, both in the public sphere and in the where we actually are committed to listening so that we can hear and understand and hear one another and together try and grow and mature. God is passionately, deeply committed to helping us grow through relationships. If you take a look at the other verse on the right-hand side there, again, from Ephesians 4, this time from verse 13, it says, this will continue until we all come to such unity in our faith and knowledge of God's Son, that we will be mature in the Lord. In other words, unity is not that we all agree on everything. Unity is not that there's never conflict. Unity equals maturity. If there's maturity, we are actually going to be growing and maturing. And so we wanted to take a look at 5 principles and practices over the next few weeks. And today I want to talk about the priority of community. We are made to belong. We are not made to do life alone. In fact, right near the beginning, I think it's Genesis 2, verse 18, God said it's not good for man to be alone, which wasn't just a promotion for marriage. He was talking about community, relationship. In that particular instance, it happened to include marriage because Eve became the first woman and Adam's wife. But that truth has continued to be true. He did not create us to do life alone. Yet it is possible to live more isolated, more privatized, and more independent than ever before in human history. And I'm telling you, it's coming at a cost. We no longer need to be bored. We can keep ourselves stimulated, distracted, connected. So we can stay incredibly disconnected in a very connected world. We can be connected, but nobody knows us. Nobody knows what's actually going on. And again, I'm just telling you, God has better. God cares, and He actually has better for us. Let me read 3 single verses to you. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 25 says, "Let us not neglect our meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of His return is drawing near." Let me read that again. Let us not, he's writing to other followers of Jesus, right? And so even 2,000 years ago already, there was competition. There was distraction. There were other things that could get in the way of them prioritizing what they needed to. Let us not neglect meeting together as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that the day of His return is drawing near. In other words, He's speaking to a level of urgency. So the why is that we can encourage one another, we can bring out the best, learn from one another. But also He's saying, because we don't know how much time we have left, we don't know when Jesus is coming back, He's saying there is an appropriate, healthy sense of urgency. One of the first records of the first groups of followers of Jesus is recorded in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, where it says that all the believers devoted themselves. So it was a personal decision, a personal commitment. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. Now, that word fellowship is a very churchy word. It's a biblical word, but it's basically referring to life-giving relationships with other followers of Jesus. Not to say that you don't have really constructive and important relationships where you add as much value as you can to those that are not in a relationship with Jesus, but He's saying that there is an important value not to be missed between followers of Jesus that are not perfect, but they're committed to growing, and so together they are engaging. It's iron sharpening iron. They devoted themselves to fellowship. And then the last one is Hebrews chapter 3, verse 12, where it says, encourage one another daily, as long as it's called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. Yeah. Encourage one another daily. In other words, He's saying it needs to be a priority. This can't be the flip of a coin. What do you feel like? No, He's saying it actually has to be a priority. I'm not saying that you have to connect in some formal way with other believers every day, but I want to highlight that for them, it was so important that they were emphasizing, make sure that you keep short accounts, that there is loads of connection. In other words, it was a priority. I want to take a look at a couple of ways that we can close the gap. So if it's a priority for us, if engaging in and growing in healthy, life-giving relationships that help us mature, if that is to be a priority, where we close the gap between intention and action, I think that there are 5 principles that we need to put into place. The first is that we actually have to have a plan. Yeah. We actually have to be structured about it. I'm not talking about structuring the life out of the relationships. I'm just saying that if we only leave meaningful, growing relationships to chance, then chances are it's not going to happen. So even what many of you are doing today, okay, some of you were fooled and duped. You thought you were going out for brunch and you turned into a church. But for others, you came here intentionally. And if that's the case, there's a good chance that this is part of your plan. Like this is part of your rhythm. This is what you do on a weekly basis. That's part of your plan. For others, there might be a commitment to maybe kids are out of the house and you have dinner together like every second Monday night or once a month for lunch on a Sunday, or maybe you're committed to a life group. That's what we call small groups that meet in people's homes. In some cases, they meet you at the church. And so there's this commitment to meeting weekly or fortnightly or whatever the case is, but there's a plan. And if it's a priority, it's going to be put in, which means that other stuff doesn't take its place. Yeah. Several weeks ago, we used the illustration from Stephen Covey of the jar that has a limited capacity, and how if we're going to put rocks, stones, pebbles, sand, water into it, the bigger rocks have to go in there first. And then the other stuff can fit in around it. I am arguing that life-giving relationships have to be one of those big stones that go in before the minutiae, before all the many, many distractions of life, to where we say, I am going to make this something that matters. I'm not going to leave relationships with my kids, or relationship with my spouse, or relationship with my friends to chance. I'm actually going to prioritize. Because if we don't, the gravitational pull of life will distract us. It will take us away. In fact, the very well-known leadership guru Jim Rohn said that ideas without action leads to delusion. Ideas without action leads to delusion. So if we're saying this matters, I think this is important, I want to grow in relationships, then we're going to actually put action in place. We're going to put a plan together. All right, so number one, we need a plan. Even for those of us that prefer being unstructured, we still need a plan, okay? Don't panic. Even for those of us that prefer being unstructured, just have some way of keeping it on the radar and in the diary. Second, we need to purge. If we're going to allow a plan to actually come into place, we're going to have to purge those things that are competing. We have to remove competition, remove distractions. Again, that's the idea of putting something that matters into that space. For me, there's a relationship that I've had with an older retired pastor for several years now, and organically we managed to connect fairly regularly, but not proactively enough. And so it's taken me a long time to get to a place where I'm saying it's important enough that I'm going to put it into the diary in advance, and other stuff has to fall in around it to where we meet once a month because of how important it is for me. And by the way, it's important for you that I have that meeting. Yeah. It's important for you that I have spaces and places where I can talk to people in a very real, raw way, as a human being, not as a pastor. Yeah. As a Christian, not as a pastor. That helps me to be healthy and to have a healthy heart and not to measure my health or maturity based on what you think, from what you see in a snapshot from stage. Yeah. I need those places. It is probably life and death important, in my opinion. It is that significant. So that means I have to get rid of those things that are going to compete for that, and they're not all bad. I'm not even talking about moral stuff. I'm just talking about the competition between good and great, or good and best. However, I don't think it takes a lot for us to agree that even in addition to all the other things that will fight for our attention, we are living in an information age. We're living in an age of distraction, where we can live constantly engaged, stimulated, and in my case, sometimes I feel overstimulated. And that's not even with social media. I just have so much information that I can keep drinking from that I need to be careful, and I need to actually put guardrails into place that my mind is not so stimulated that I don't ever go deep enough on the things that I need to go deep enough on. So for some people, it would be media and entertainment and just living in the age of information and distraction. In fact, Tybo Maurice, in his book Dopamine Detox, says the following: dopamine and constant stimulation, which I can relate to, can impair your ability to think long term. Studies have shown that one of the best predictors of success is the ability to think long term. People who repeatedly focus on where they want to be in the future make better decisions in the present. They tend to eat healthier food, be more productive at work, and save and invest more than others. In other words, if I'm just allowing myself to live a constantly distracted life, I'm going to live a constantly superficial life. And as I've spoken about before, one of my challenges is defaulting into resting with stuff that'll just switch my brain off, but that can become mindless stuff. And so I can land up feeding my mind on junk food, and then being surprised that the junk food I've fed my mind on has the effect on my mind that feeding my body on junk food has on my body. And for those of you that are a little bit older than 30, know that you can only eat so much junk food before it has a very negative effect. Yeah. For those of you that are older and it has no effect, God bless you. I'm not jealous at all. But I've had to start paying attention to the fact that I am often feeding my mind on junk food. It is empty calories, and it's actually competing with what matters most, because I don't have the capacity left to do what's actually good for me. It's so much easier for me to just relax with entertainment than if I'm tired and stressed out than what it is to want to prioritize relationships. We need to recognize and resist those things that are competition. And by the way, I mean, that's just the low-hanging fruit that a lot of us can relate to that. But for others, it might be a disproportionate, an unhealthy amount of time spent with work, where we idolize work, and so working is important. Work existed before sin came into the world. Work is not a problem. But if I idolize that and I'm spending 60, 70, 80 hours a week, don't be surprised that you have no capacity left for your family or for friends or for anything that actually means anything. If I am being constantly, if I'm spending all of my energy in that, it could be a disproportionate amount of energy spent on a hobby. Now, I think hobbies are really good. I think that we need recreation. It literally recreates. But if I allow that to become an idol, if I now spend 30 hours a week on that, again, chances are between all my other responsibilities and that, I'm probably not going to have the capacity that I want to have in order to spend time with other people. In case you think you're off the hook, for others, it could be a lack of healthy boundaries in our lives, to where we allow the wrong people to put unhealthy guilt and pressure and manipulation onto us, where they're putting their responsibility onto us to help carry them. And so because we're not living with healthy, appropriate boundaries, we have nothing left for what matters most, for being proactive with healthy relationships. Now, there's a balance, just to be clear, in case any of you are not hearing my heart. There's a tension to be managed, okay? So for Sue and I, 6 days out of 7, we are pretty much available to give out to others. And even then, I mean, there are obviously boundaries that we've tried to learn and establish so that it's constructive, because the needs are always greater than what we have to offer. But there is one day a week that unless there's a crisis, there's a 24-hour period that I am accepting the gift of rest from God. And I'm accepting and I'm remembering that I'm not a machine, that God loves me before I can produce, and that the problem will still be there tomorrow. So yesterday, I can appreciate going out for a walk in Newlands Forest and being energized. Now, I'm still thinking about some things that I'm trying not to think about, and I'm praying because I'm burdened about a particular situation. But for the most part, I didn't engage or respond to any crises yesterday, and there were crises. I responded to it at 5:30 this morning because it was still there. They weren't going anywhere. And so because of allowing God's plan, God's way, God's rhythm to increasingly become a part of my life, I'm able to better serve people and love people. So we need to purge anything that's going to compete. Then, number 3, we need patience. If you've ever tried to grow in relationships with people, especially in a church context, which is no small miracle, by the way, okay, you're allowed to look around for a moment. Just take a moment. Take a moment, look around. Like 5% of you are looking around. This is a very diverse group of people. Age-wise, race and cultural, socioeconomic, levels of education, what your first or home language is. It is no small miracle to grow in relationship over time. And so it requires patience. Even when you think that you are engaging with someone else that comes from a lot of the same experience as you, same socioeconomic, same background, same education, maybe even in the same career, it's still hard. Because we're human beings, right? And so there are things about us that can bring out other things in other people. And so we need to be okay with it being a journey, with it being a process. Relationships are not efficient. It'd be great if they were. It'd be great if there was a simple formula and we just say A plus B plus C, we're going to have the most incredible relationship. Trust will have been built. We can carry each other. We're never going to gossip. We're never going to backstep. We're never going to disappoint. It's just going to be perfect. No, that depends on our maturity and how we are growing and developing. So I want to encourage you to start small. It is not a good idea, if you're meeting someone for the first time, to just vomit everything about your life onto them. That's going to be a little bit hectic, Okay? That's going to be a little bit scary for the person. No, it's a journey. We go through different levels of where we're sharing a little bit about, maybe it's just facts. So we in our church, not that this is scientific, we just talk about levels relating to facts, feelings, and formation. Facts is where it's a little bit more informational, it's superficial, it's and hopefully some fun. Like there's a good place for fun and laughter and just enjoying each other. If you don't enjoy each other at all, you're really going to struggle to have a meaningful relationship long term. Okay? Just so you know. That's not going to be easy. So there, and we'll talk a little bit more about chemistry next week. So there's that entry, superficial facts, informational stuff. But then maybe if you go a little bit deeper, you start to share a little bit more. So maybe facts might be that I am married, I'm a dad, this is what I do for a living. But if you're going to go a little bit deeper, feelings might be saying, hey, this is, I love my girls, but we're busy going through a season at the moment that's just been challenging. Like, we're needing a lot of wisdom. We're needing some discernment to know how to best journey with them. That's sharing a little bit more than just the facts. Or, I'm in grade 11, and these are my subject choices. Those are facts. The fact that you hate your subjects and don't know what you're going to do in a year and a bit is sharing a little bit more about how you feel. And then we see how people handle that. If people are dismissive, if people aren't paying attention. And so in order for a relationship to go deeper, these are little opportunities to actually identify. But in some cases, and there are few and far between, as trust is built, and it takes time. Trust takes time. As you share a little bit and you see how that's handled, and trust is built, the idea is that you get to a place where it's actually formational, where it is iron sharpening iron, and where you have each other's backs, and where you're able to support and encourage. Think about the term encourage. To encourage is when someone has lost courage to actually be able to give courage back. Yeah. To carry on, to be reminded. We need this. On the screen, we're going to show you something called the 6-stage cycle of community. I'm not going to unpack this in great detail, but it comes from Practicing the Way and their practice on community. And you'll see just very quickly at the cycle, on the top right-hand side, you'll see that, and this is if there is a bit of chemistry, right? People will have that honeymoon phase where they're enjoying each other, and the focus is more on what they have in common than what they don't. Then, very often, we'll hit that apathy phase, where like the sheen has worn off. And you now kind of like get to know each other. And okay, you're also human. And so it's just, you don't, maybe you get together as a life group regularly and you're not getting quite as much out of it as what you used to in the past. And then, sometimes, just so you know, this isn't guaranteed, but sometimes, maybe especially if you serve on a team with other people, in a church context in particular, chances are you'll hit that frustration and fear portion where you realize each other's shortcomings, where you realize each other's weaknesses, or what we might call a shadow side, or sometimes just flat out sin. Hey, this person lied, or they gossiped. Which, just so you know, side note, guys, gossip has got to be one of the most destructive things that you can engage in and allow in any social group, including, and if not more so, in a church context. If you are willing to talk about a person but not to the person, then just acknowledge it and own it and call it what it is. But if you're growing in loving one another, there's a place to talk to someone that is more mature to get perspective on, should I, how should I, do you think it's a me thing, is it a them thing, is this something worth addressing? But when we're just talking to our chommies and not to the person, I think in some cases, now I don't think anyone's thinking this consciously, but if you really want to break it down, you might as well say they can go to hell. Because in some cases, that gossip is so destructive to the relationship and the trust that in so many, how many people have left churches and never come back simply because of gossip? So I'm saying you might as well say, if I'm willing to gossip about someone and I'm not having a constructive conversation about it and I'm not talking to them, I might as well say, you know what, I'm okay with them being separated from God. Worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, I'm okay with them feeling like they're not welcome, leaving the church, and who knows what the future holds. Do you think God cares about gossip? I think he cares massively. Massively, massively. Now, the alternative is not to pretend like nothing's wrong. It's to talk to the person. Yeah. It's to have honest conversations in a constructive way. All right, my personal rant over. All right, so we need a plan. We need to purge. We need to be patient because it is a journey. And then second last, is that we need to actually progress, which means that we need to, every now and then, review and adjust. If you are only ever staying at that superficial level, if people can only ever talk about rugby or soccer or the weather with you and you with them, then adjust something. Not with everybody, but with somebody or with a few people. Like, we have to go a little bit deeper. But I also want to encourage you to start where you are, not where you want to be. So for some people here today, right now, you. For some of us, we need to start with letting someone know our names and finding out theirs. In fact, a lady came up to me after the first service, and because I shared this, she introduced herself very sheepishly because it's very uncomfortable for her. So I get this. Just so you know, I know. If it were up to me, I don't need a lot of people. I'm far more on the introverted side of things. I'm okay with familiar relationships. But I know, and I believe that God has called me to more than just what's most comfortable for me. And so that's a muscle that's had to develop over time. But anyway, she came, introduced herself. I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. How long have you been attending? I thought she was going to say like a week or 2 or 3. It's been a year. I'm like, well done. Well done for, and then I introduced her to somebody else. And so the idea is that there should be at least somebody. I'm saying if this is a church that you've made or are making your home, and you've been here for more than a couple of weeks, guys, you should know somebody's name and somebody should know your name. And I'm not talking about the person you came with. Okay? Just in case that's what you're thinking. How sad when you find out 6 months down the line that someone's dying of cancer and nobody even knew, they don't even know who you're talking about. But that person would have considered themselves a part of the church. Guys, that's sad. Do you think that's God's plan? That's not his plan. He wants us to know and be known. I remember introducing myself to a gentleman many, many years ago. This was when I was still at the church in Tableview, and I was just walking around long before the service, just greeting people, and I introduced myself to the guy, saying, hi, my name's Jason. Is this your first time? Just so you know, I've stopped asking, is this your first time? Because normally, it's embarrassing. But in this particular case, he's like, no, I've been coming for 8 years. I was like, that says a lot more about you than what that says about me, in my opinion. I mean, at first I was awkward, and I was like, wait, how do you consider yourself a part of a church for 8 years and nobody knows? Now, I mean, hopefully you haven't been around for 8 years and nobody knows your name, but because this isn't actually meant to be like a discouraging thing. I'm saying, let's take responsibility. Yeah. Let's not live isolated and then get discouraged that nobody knows us and we don't know anybody. And then somewhere down the line, we just blame the church that nobody cares. Now, we have to do everything that we can to be proactive. Absolutely. Absolutely. But I'm also asking you to take appropriate responsibility. So if that's where you're needing to start, maybe today, just make the decision to introduce yourself to one person. If nobody knows you and you don't know them, chances are you're sitting where you normally sit if you come regularly. Chances are you recognize a lot of the names, a lot of the faces of the people around you. Just introduce yourself to one of them. Because chances are you're going to sit near them next week. Now you all know who Jade is, so you can introduce yourself to her when she's back in church. Guys, let's start where we are. But you might know tons of people superficially, but nobody even has the first clue of whether or not there's anything that you're dealing with. Then take the next step with someone that you have been growing with. And maybe you're okay with being transparent, and I want to point out that there's a difference between transparency and vulnerability. So maybe you're okay with being transparent and everybody knows your business, but you're not actually vulnerable with anyone. The difference is that when you're vulnerable with someone, you're giving them something. You're sharing something with them with which they can hurt you. In other words, how they handle that. In other words, it's not just a scar, it's a wound. A scar you can share transparently. A wound is like, hey, there's still some pain there. And so if you're going to trust someone with that and they mishandle that, which is why, again, there should be a little bit of a track record that this is someone that maybe they've already shown signs that they will handle it with care and with integrity. So I'm saying maybe you are very transparent with people, but maybe the next step for you is to get a little bit vulnerable. And then lastly is purpose. So we've spoken about plan, about purging, about patience, the fact that we need to make sure that we're making progress. Lastly, we need to remember our why. We need to be reminded that there is an actual purpose connected to us knowing and being known. There is a why. Yeah. And if we forget our why, we will not endure with the what. We will not persevere. We will not be patient. We will get disillusioned. We will give up. So here's my question for you. If you are someone that is online at all, this might not be everybody, but I imagine it's most of you. Remember the purpose, to be known. Is there anybody in your life that knows you anywhere near as well as your online algorithm? Chances are, Google, Instagram, TikTok know you better than anybody else. They have figured out the algorithm. In some cases, they'll know you better than you know yourself. And I want to suggest that God would like you to have some people that know you at least a little bit as well as what Google knows you. Or AI now. And for you to know somebody else. Because by the way, you can't take responsibility for somebody else's actions and behavior towards you. That may be thoroughly disappointing. You can only take responsibility for yourself. So my encouragement is that you sow the kind of seed that you would like to harvest one day. You cannot make someone be the kind of friend that you think they should be. But you can be a friend to somebody else. You can care for somebody else. And in case you think, yeah, Jason, you're a pastor, like you have to, like you pay to care for people. You'd be wrong. I mean, no, you'd be wrong. Literally this morning, in addition to some other stuff, there's a crisis in another church that I'm a part of, that I'm connected to, that I'm very, 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 very burdened about. Like I'm distracted and I'm trying to keep it in check. And I'm praying for it, I'm praying for wisdom, I'm praying for discernment. But this morning, there are several families in our church that I'm praying for, and I promise you, it's not because I'm the pastor. It's because I'm a Christian. It's because I have a in fact, of this list, I think that there were 5 or 6 families that I have a reminder going off regularly to pray for. For husband, wife, children, just because of various situations. Maybe 5 or 6 of those, and then there's another family. That one family, I'm trying to remind myself because I'm the pastor. I think that's the right thing for me to do at the moment. These other 5 or 6, it's got nothing to do with my position or my role. It's because I am a brother. I'm a fellow follower. We are in relationship, in some cases for many, many, many years. And so they are hurting and they're struggling, and I care, and I think that part of caring is doing the little bit that I can do. That's because I'm a Christian, not because I'm the pastor. And so I just want to encourage you. Don't think you have to be a leader or have some responsibility to have No, if you are a Christian, if you are a follower of Jesus, you are called to love others. You can't take responsibility for how they love you, but you can take responsibility for how you love them. And they don't even have to know that you're praying or that you're thinking or that you're caring or that you're trying to do stuff. Just love, commit to loving people. I love how Eugene Peterson says that no Christian is an only child. You may behave like an only child. You may want nothing to do with the family. But hey, you're stuck with us. As in like the global, the capital C church. If you're a Christian, if you're in a relationship with God, you have a whole lot of brothers and sisters. It's just up to you whether or not you allow a relationship to be formed. And I genuinely believe that He wants us to grow in life-giving, iron sharpening iron, bringing out the best in each other, encouraging one another, praying for one another, having fun and laughter with one another. Please, if you are a more intense, melancholic personality, it can't all be hectic and serious and intense. I'm saying that as a melancholic, intense personality, okay? I've had to learn. People can only deal with so much intensity for so long. Have fun. Do stupid stuff. Like, not too stupid, but like just have fun. Like it's okay to live in the superficial a lot of the time. But every now and then, you go down. Again, if you're not enjoying it, if you're just enduring it, it's going to be a problem. One more time. Hebrews 10, verse 25. Let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do. And I can almost imagine the author being like, you know who you are. As some of you do. Do not neglect our meeting together, but encourage one another. So here's my question before we pray. And I'd invite you to close your eyes for a moment. In fact, why don't you stand? Put your stuff down. And just for a moment, would you close your eyes and ask God if there is somebody that He might be bringing to your attention so that you can encourage them? And that could be a text message just now. That could be, maybe they're here, and so you just want to go up after the service and give them a hug or tell them something that you believe to be true that you know would be encouraging. And just so you know, there's a difference between flattering and encouraging. Flattering is blowing smoke and saying nice things that aren't true. Encouraging is acknowledging what is true, what is right. When I say to you that Jade is one of the nicest people you'll ever see, or no, like that is not flattery. She's caring, kind, compassionate. That is encouraging. That is reminding. That is acknowledging what is true. Would you ask God for a moment just to bring someone to mind? Lord, is there someone that I can encourage? Someone that I can just affirm, speak life into, or just maybe it's just simply telling them that I really appreciate them. I appreciate you in my life. You're a blessing to me.